Protests sparked from George Floyd's death are sweeping across the nation and even around the world.
A spotlight is now focused on policing to help us understand how our experiences play a role in reaching this boiling point. We reached out to Washington State University School of Nursing for answers on implicit bias.
Out of one man's death comes the pain, sorrow, and anger of many around the world.
That people are really recognizing the massive injustice, and not just members of the African American community.
Dr. Lois James describes the intensity of these protests as striking. As an assistant professor for WSU Nursing, she studies the connection between implicit bias and policing. This doesn't just fall on the police. We all have biases. It's human nature. Yet implicit bias is the attitudes and stereotypes we have towards others that we may not be aware of, some of which can carry heavy consequences. Dr. James believes implicit bias training is an important step to avoid tragedies like these.
In some cases, of course, it's mandated. In some cases, departments want to be proactive and they want to kind of get out ahead of a potential issue.
She believes a lot of officers want to do better and are trying, yet there are a number of challenges when it comes to this training. Policing data isn't standardized, so it's hard to say how many departments actually offer implicit bias training. Then there's the challenge of police allowing access to this data, the question of the quality of this training, and getting officers on board.
If the time is right for real, honest reform, we need to move forward in a smart and strategic way.
Dr. James fully acknowledges policing is difficult and dangerous.
I understand the hurt there, but what's really important is for officers to try and kind of put any personal feelings of victimization aside and recognize that this is important for the profession.
At the end of the day, while efforts can be made on both sides, she says the responsibility of battling implicit bias lies on the police, and breakthroughs are emerging.
There are lots and lots of examples of departments around the country that have come forward and said there's no way we would have stayed silent, there's no way we would have let what happened to Mr. Floyd happen. You see instances even in our city, the chief praying with protesters. We see across the country there's footage of officers kneeling with protesters.
Her research also shows there's a connection between the health and wellness of officers and implicit bias.
For example, so when officers are extremely tired, they're less able to check their responses. They're less able to think and rationalize and empathize. If we have healthier, happier cops, they're going to do better.
Programs like Coffee with a Cop and having officers show up to community events to interact with the public will help police and different groups find common ground. Dr. James predicts there will be a greater push for these community-oriented policing programs along with implicit bias training.
But implicit bias is something that we all experience, is something that we all have. And although the police, of course, as the kind of the gatekeepers to the criminal justice system are a very important part of that and where that really shows up, I think we all need to do better, and we all need to think about the things that we can do